Now let's look at the parallel performance of a coarray partial differential equation solver that is slightly more complicated than the heat equation we looked at in the last video. This solver uses the same spatial differencing and time advancement algorithms as we used to solve the heat equation. The solver also uses the same functional, object-oriented programming style. The equation it solves is an equation first published by the Dutch mathematician J.M. Burgers in 1948. Here we're expressing Burgers' equation in a notation wherein subscripts indicate differentiation with respect to the subscripted variable. Thus, Burgers' equation equates the time derivative of its solution, u, with a diffusion coefficient nu times the second spatial derivative of u minus a nonlinear term. The nonlinear term is the first derivative of 1/2 u squared. We will apply periodic boundary conditions on the interval 0 to 2 pi. Our initial condition is a sine wave. Looking at the numerical solution, we see that the linear diffusion term damps the wave over time, while the nonlinear term steepens the wave. Let's first examine the load balancing of the solver across the images. This is a plot produced by the open source Tuning and Analysis Utilities package, TAU, developed at the University of Oregon. Recall that the Intel compiler maps images to MPI processes. The right-hand axis shows the MPI rank, which in our case equals the image number minus 1. So we are analyzing a simulation running in parallel in 256 images. The left-hand axis shows the names of several of the procedures that execute in this solver. And the vertical axis shows the execution time each image spends inside each procedure, including the time spent inside the procedures a given procedure calls. By the flatness of the surface along the MPI rank axis, we can discern that the computational load is nicely balanced across all images. Furthermore, we see from the red bar that the main program takes the most inclusive runtime, as would be expected because main calls all the other procedures. Second only to the main program is the generic type-bound assignment that assigns a local field to what we called in the heat equation solver global field, which is called tensor in this code. As with the heat equation solver, that assignment contains a synchronization, which as we can see from the third tallest bar, takes up the lion's share of the time in the assignment. This result underscores the importance of writing asynchronous code. Repeated synchronization, as happens inside the time advancement loop, is costly. In this case, the synchronization is largely imposed by the chosen algorithm. A paper I published with Carla Morris of Sandia National Laboratories and Magna Havidwan at the University of Bergen, presented at the Supercomputing Conference in 2013, briefly discusses an algorithmic modification that can reduce the need for synchronization. What we can see from the remaining bars is that all of the floating point calculations, such as the first and second derivatives, require less execution time than the synchronization inside the assignment. Also, the one-time synchronization inside the constructors has negligible impact on the execution time. Next, we're going to look at how the Burgers solver speeds up as we take advantage of larger and larger hardware resources. Ideally, we would expect that the amount we could speed up the execution would equal the number of processor cores available to us. We'll define the parallel efficiency as the ratio of the actual speed up to the ideal speed up. And for our grand finale for this JOLT, let's let this baby rip on up to 16,384 cores, running with one image per core. We'll also increase the problem size in direct proportion to the number of images. This is commonly referred to as weak scaling. This plot demonstrates that our object-oriented, functional, coarray, partial differential equation solver scales beyond 16,000 cores with 87% parallel efficiency. The source code is standard conforming Fortran 2008 with no explicit reference to any external libraries. In particular, the source code contains no calls to the message passing interface, MPI, and no OpenMP compiler directives. The baseline case for this plot is a distributed memory job executing on 2 nodes. All runs were completed on a Cray supercomputer at the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center. This concludes the core resources portion of this JOLT. Under the Helpful Links tab, you'll find a citation to a paper presented at the Supercomputing Conference in 2011. That paper demonstrated the use of coarrays in a much more complicated solver, a plasma fusion simulation code. The authors, researchers at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, Cray Incorporated, and the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, replaced the plasma fusion solver's hybrid MPI/OpenMP communication kernel with a hybrid coarray/OpenMP kernel and achieved a 52% speedup running on up to 130,560 cores. On a separate note, you might be interested to know that it's also possible to mix coarrays with MPI in one code.